Yeah. Good morning. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Marimo. I'm working at the Dutch mission in Geneva on digital and cyber issue, and I'm very pleased to be your moderator today for this session on safeguarding critical infrastructure beyond borders. Actually, the entire idea behind this session is really to look at how we can better work between the diplomatic and the technical community and how to strengthen those efforts with a very concrete example on the critical infrastructure. So through this concrete example, we would like to look at the different region, and we have like esteemed experts on our panel to help us guide through how it's working today, how the diplomatic and the technical community are working to address the threats that they are facing, and how in the future we should like really endorse those relations to make our cyber environment even more resilient. So as you know, there's malicious activities that are targeting critical infrastructure. Unfortunately, those activities can have a spillover effects, and we really need to work on fostering resilience and cyber resilience. For this, we need to build capacity, we need to increase those collaboration, and really this relation between the diplomatic and the technical community is key. And that's what we're going to try to explore. At the moment, we are still like working a bit in silos, but we have seen some changes in the past. And we are hoping with our expert on the panel to explore how, from their perspective, they've addressed those issues and they've tried to reach the gap between the technical and the diplomatic community. We will guide you through 3 different themes. So just so you're aware before we start, there is a journey that we are going to have together. We will first look at the cyber threats, and then the policy response that we have now, and then the opportunities for a greater collaboration. So on the panel that I'm very pleased to moderate, we have Mr. Orhan Osmani, who is with us online. He is the head of the cybersecurity division at the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, in the Telecommunication Development Bureau. So he's leading lots of capacity building around the world on the cyber activities. We will also have Sharifa Rashida Syed Othman, Director of Policy and International Cooperation at the National Cybersecurity Agency of Malaysia. And she really has a specific role because she is sitting in a technical agencies, but she's also following lots of those UN development and discussion. So she is, I would say, one of the incarnation of how you can also make the link between the technical and the diplomatic community. We will also have Dr. Tawela Nirenda Jere, head of the Secretariat at the Africa EU Energy Partnership. And we also have Francisca Klopfer. She works at DCAF, the General Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, and she is the principal project manager for cybersecurity governance. She works a lot in the Western Balkans, so we already have like different perspective, and we know how crucial it is at the regional level, not only at the international level, but to work together. And it will be interesting to see if there are some differences in the approach that are being adopted in the different regions. And then finally, we have Ms. Wendan He, associate researcher with the Security and Technology Program at UNIDIR. She has been, she's like an expert on those issues, so she will provide us also with a great scene setter before we all dive into the discussion. And then because the panel wouldn't be like finalized with Teresa Oryeshova. She's Senior Outreach Manager at the Global Forum for Cybersecurity Expertise, and she will help us make the most out of the discussion and everything that we will hear in the next hour. So so those are my panelists, and we will together like go through this journey on where we are, what has been done, and also where we can do better and improve our work together. So as I said, we will follow like a 3 steps approach. And we will start with actually going through the ICT threats framework, and then how this this the threats are really targeting critical infrastructure and how it impacts international peace and security. So for this, I'm going to first ask Wenting to give us a bit of a scene setter about what are the different components of critical infrastructure that facilitate the provision of essential services across borders. What are the issue like with the jurisdiction, but also what kind of type of threats, and how you've seen the evolution of the landscape. But also how can those malicious activities actually impact international peace and security. So the floor is yours to like give us a bit of a background. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie. I hope you can all hear me, and these are very important questions. So while critical infrastructure designations vary across jurisdictions, there is this broad recognition of certain sectors as critical or important. So this includes energy, transportation, telecommunications, commercial and financial systems, among other things. Many of these sectors provide essential services across national borders. For example, transnational energy pipelines operate at national, regional, and international levels. Critical information infrastructure, in particular, refers to information and communication systems and networks whose disruption or damage could severely impact essential societal functions. So this type of infrastructure includes subsea cables, satellite systems, and cloud infrastructure, such as data centers, all of which support critical information and communication services across multiple states. For the interest of time, I will focus on subsea cables and satellite systems. But if you are interested in, the cloud side of things, Unidir is publishing some reports on this topic very shortly. So please check out our website. So it's no exaggeration to say that subsea cables really form the backbone of global communication. They transmit over 95% of international data traffics, and they enable reliable, efficient, cost-effective data transfers between data centers globally, which supports cloud services that we are all benefiting from. However, these cables are particularly vulnerable to physical threats. According to the International Cable Protection Committee, so each year, approximately 150 to 200 cable faults occur globally, primarily due to accidental human activities such as fishing and anchoring. Additionally, cable infrastructure also faces cyber risks. And these include potential hacking of the remote network management systems used for monitoring and managing cable activities. Satellite systems also play a very critical role in global communication. They provide internet connectivity in like large areas of the globe, particularly in remote or underserved areas. However, over recent years, disruptions to space assets are becoming increasingly common. Potential threats include denial of service attacks, command injection, malware, signal interference, and physical damage to the satellite components. So in terms of the evolving threat landscape, attacks on international critical infrastructure and critical information infrastructure can disrupt essential cross-border services with increased complexity and impact. This challenge is especially pronounced in the increasingly digitalized world where such attacks especially those targeting critical information infrastructure, including the relevant ICT supply chains and service providers, can significantly amplify both the reach and consequences of malicious activities, thus making such actions, thus making this type of infrastructure a compelling target for attackers. Additionally, the transnational nature of this infrastructure adds further complexity to its protection, making international collaboration a very essential element of effective safeguards and responses. And I know we will delve into this further. And now I will turn to the international security and peace implications of malicious activities targeting transnational CI or CII, so critical infrastructure and critical information infrastructure. Well, I don't know how familiar you are with familiar with the ongoing processes at the UN on cyber security, but the ongoing UN Open-Ended Working Group, or OEWG, on ICTs through its annual progress reports emphasized that malicious ICT activities targeting critical infrastructure and critical information infrastructure can have cascading effects at national, regional, and international levels. Such activities can pose heightened risks to populations across regions and can be also escalatory. In particular, the OEWG highlighted the need to secure subsea cables and satellite communication networks from malicious activities, which could cause significant disruption and damage to telecommunications, and also potentially affect the technical infrastructure essential to the availability and integrity of the internet in large areas of the globe. Subsea cables have historically been targeted during conflict as a means to disrupt an adversary's communication. For instance, at the beginning of the First World War, one of the British military's first moves was actually to sever Germany's undersea telegraph cables. Today, subsea cable networks have become increasingly complex and interconnected, transmitting vast volumes of data for both military and civilian purposes. Malicious attacks on this dual-use critical infrastructure pose significant risks to global connectivity, but also to international security. Attribution challenges further complicate the issue, as it is often very difficult to determine who is behind the cable damages. This uncertainty could lead to accusations and potentially escalating tensions between states, even when the disruption may in fact be unintentional. So in the current environment of heightened geopolitical tensions, national security surrounding subsea cables can drive further technological competitions over cable ownership, construction, and landing points, with important implications for global and also regional stability. Furthermore, satellite systems also play a very vital role in armed conflict, supporting critical military functions, including communication, navigation, and also intelligence gathering. Attacks targeting satellite networks and ground stations have the potential to disrupt adversaries' critical military operations, thus increasing the likelihood of such actions in conflict scenarios. Moreover, due to the dual use and transnational nature of satellite services, cyber attacks can have far-reaching consequences. This impact may extend far beyond the warring parties to affect also civilians and civilian services internationally and across sectors. I will stop here, Marie, and over back.
Thank you very much, Wenting. So now we kind of have the parameters of the journey we are going through. But like as in any journey, there's unexpected thing that can happen. So I would like to ask my panelists, I know we prepared some questions, but if you feel the willingness to interrupt or to ask other question or complement what is being said, please feel free. We're looking at you also on the screen. So just like wave, and then we will give you the floor accordingly. But as any journey, it's always more interesting when it's when everybody can participate. So maybe I will now turn first to Rashida. And maybe you can give us a bit of your perspective actually from the Asian Pacific region, and what kinds of threats you're like experiencing on critical infrastructure and the potential impact of cyber attacks targeting such sectors on at national and regional level. So the floor is yours, Rashida. And thank you for joining us, because I know you're not also on the same time zone.
Thank you very much. A very good afternoon here, but I just want to flag everyone that currently there is azan for the prayer time in Malaysia where I could not lower the volume. It's in the building. If it's okay with the audience, I can proceed, or else can I just wait for just 1 minute to make sure this ends? If it's okay for all of you.
It's as you prefer. Honestly, it's part of the journey, I guess. So if you want to do it now, please feel free. The sound is good on our side.
Yeah. All right. So of course, let me just if it's okay, can I just wait, because it's
Okay.
it's quite very loud here. So
Yes,
I
no
will
worries.
continue after this. Thank you very much. I'm sorry.
So I see Tawela has now joined online. So maybe we'll start our journey with Africa then. And then if Tawela, can you just maybe share with us your experience on Africa's energy sector, and could you I she will need permission to speak.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Just
Oh
checking if
yes,
you
now
can
it's
hear.
working. We can hear you. Yes.
Okay. My apologies. I've been struggling a little bit with the connection on this side, but I'm definitely happy to be joining you all. I'm gonna see if I can turn on my camera now.
Yes. We can hear you. Oh, now we can see you. Perfect.
Okay.
Well, thank you for joining us, Tuwela. So maybe you can give us a bit of your experience from the African energy sector.
Thank you very much, and good morning again to everyone. Good afternoon as well, and fellow panelists likewise. So I'm joining you from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and for those that may not know, I am currently now leading the Africa EU Energy Partnership, which looks at promoting collaboration between the two continents on issues relating to energy and a just energy transition. I think in terms of this topic around critical infrastructure in Africa, and maybe being very specific in terms of the energy sector, I think one of the things that is very evident perhaps is that within the ICT ecosystem, the issues around critical infrastructure are well known and well discussed. And perhaps in energy, the conversation is a little bit different, but at the same time needs to be brought perhaps to the same level as the discussions that we are having in the digital space. So when you look at Africa's energy landscape, currently, of course, we know that 55 member states, 5 geographic regions, each of which has their own systems and ways of connecting and interconnecting through the different power pools that exist. And what has been done now is that at the level of the AU is that there is an effort now to look at interconnecting the entire continent by really putting in the relevant infrastructure that would connect countries and then regions, and at the same time looking at the harmonization of the different regulatory elements that would make that possible. And the whole idea is to be able then to facilitate the flow of energy across the continent and beyond in terms of meeting Africa's energy needs, but also being able to then export excess capacity outwards. What this then means is that there's a lot of emphasis being put on these interconnections that are cross-border and transboundary. And when we start talking about this particular interconnection and the idea that we will need some form of smart grids to be able to manage this whole system, issues around being able to then define critical infrastructure in the energy sector become important, because these cross-border links are very critical insofar as making the system work. At the same time, the aspects of cybersecurity and how we secure that infrastructure also become very important. And these are some of the things that in my previous job at AUD and NEPAD, we had looked at as we were developing this Continental Power Systems Master Plan. And one of the recommendations we made was to from the very beginning, to incorporate this understanding of cybersecurity and the need to make sure that within the energy sector, we were actually also looking at developing adequate capacities in terms of cybersecurity. So I think where we are now is that as a continent, there hasn't yet been any kind of overarching framework insofar as critical infrastructure from an energy perspective. And that is one of the things that we will start looking at now. Different countries, of course, have some policies and that are looking at critical infrastructure. So South Africa is a good example. I believe Kenya is also another example. And the idea then would be that to learn from these experiences, to look at regional frameworks, and then ultimately to have a continental framework that looks at critical infrastructure from the perspective of the energy sector. Back to you, Marie.
Thank you very much, Dawela. I think it's, as you said, that the more you interconnect with those critical infrastructures, such as the energy, the more also you will need each other to make sure that those cyber threats do not impact your network as well. So thank you very much for sharing your initial perspective. And maybe now I think, Rashida, you can provide your perspective from the Asia Pacific. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marie, for the introductions. And I also want to thank Wenting for giving and setting the scene, and also has giving a perspective of the ongoing discussions at the OEWG, as well as the development and what actually the importance of critical infrastructure that strengthen international peace and security. And also to allow that actually explain in terms of how energy sector is important and the initiative that has been done. And earlier, Marie introduced me that I came from an organization that implements cybersecurity. And also, I also want to acknowledge this is an opportunity and also benefits that I got from the Women in Cyber Fellows, where I think GFCE is also actually facilitating this hosting and facilitating this event. And because of that, is actually make me understand, and also a learning experience as well in terms of connecting between the importance of how national levels needs to implement the framework of responsible state behavior, and how best we can do that in actionable item or actionable action. So coming back to the questions earlier regarding critical infrastructure sectors across border in Asia Pacific region, I think earlier Wenting described about two things, which is the subsea cables as well as the satellite system, which I think it is global to any other region of the world. But one thing that I also want to connect and relate what actually happened at national level, which I think Dawela mentioned specifically on energy. Because one is, we hear earlier, depending on the country, how actually they determine the critical infrastructure. And the critical infrastructure does not, or CII does not exist in vacuum. It actually relates to the risks that the country face, and also what actually define the country's importance. For example, in Malaysia, for our Cybersecurity Act, we define critical infrastructure 11th sector. In our Cybersecurity Act, we define infrastructure as a computer or computer system which disruption or destruction of the computer or computer system which would have a detrimental impact on the delivery of any services essential to the security, defense, foreign relations, economy, public health, public safety and public order of Malaysia, or on the ability of the federal government or any of the states governments to carry out its function effectively. And coming back to the sector specific of critical infrastructure, even at national level, they actually exist vertically and horizontally. In terms of horizontally, for example, energy, regardless how strong our subsea cable, how strong our satellite system, if energy is out, you cannot even operate the cyber environment. That's how the importance of the interdependency of each and every critical infrastructure. At the same time, depending on which part of the world you are, if the energy comes from the water, hydro or water will become another part of important things of the country and goes back to what is the resource of the energy. Coming back to how actually we develop and how actually at Asia Pacific and why actually specifically in ASEAN, how we put the importance of critical infrastructure. In ASEAN, we actually has produced an ASEAN cyber cooperation strategy, where in the strategy, one of the dimension, it says about advancing cyber readiness cooperation, where two important things being put. One is the CERT cooperations and coordination, where recently we have established and launched our ASEAN regional CERT together with all ASEAN member states. And secondly, of course, the focus is on the coordination of regional CII protection. So in a nutshell, the discussions that happening at the UN actually complements the work that we do at national level. And having been in an organizations that actually do both, we actually work together with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and see how this thing can actually interconnected, interdependency, and also it will reflect not only at national level, regional level, and at the global level, apparently. I will stop here.
Thank you very much, Rashida, and thank you for sharing your personal experience as well. I think you are a good example on how the technical community and the diplomatic community, as well as we should look at the national, regional, and international level altogether. And I think you made a great point about the complementarity of those different approaches. As well, I think one important point about how you at national level define critical infrastructure, I think that's also an important point for each and every one of us to better understand what another countries understand as what critical infrastructure on top of what we have discussing at international level. So maybe we will move on in our journey to actually, and what you mentioned, Rashida, with your national experience, I think, and your regulatory framework is actually the perfect path through our next step in our journey, which is really looking at the policy responses and the lesson learned from good practices on the protection of critical infrastructure. I saw you, Oran. I think I saw some of the ping that you did, like popping in onto our screen that we have here. So I feel like you are now, like, it's time for you to step in and then to tell you a bit more about how to strengthen the protection of transnational critical infrastructure. Is there a scope for the diplomatic and technical community to work together to actually mitigate those ICT incidents? Oran, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Marie, and good afternoon and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. I think, as your question points, is there a scope between diplomatic and technical community to work together to mitigate these incidents? I think there is always, if there is a will, always there is a way to do things. So I think, I stand by that. But I think what we need to do is basically probably we need to take a step back and on national level connect these two communities, because we see huge gaps between diplomatic and technical community on national level. And that one basically blocks the future collaboration on international level. So, if we are clear on national level where we stand in terms of cybersecurity from diplomatic and technical point of view, I think we can basically strengthen collaboration, and we can work together towards, an understanding that, some of the critical infrastructures which serve the essential services in the countries needs to be protected, and they must be protected, because, we are talking about, people who are now, and more and more people are on medical devices, which, basically they're life supporting devices. And any energy, let's say any energy attack, it attacks those devices which are keeping people alive. So I think, we need to have compassion towards those people. And I think we need to promote more that, what is at risk there. And I think, besides, I think, I heard Venting, she was talking about, mainly focusing on state to state challenges they have on, but also we have the big group of those who are making money, the cyber criminals, who are basically, it's a big industry, so it's bigger than anything, and cybercrime threats are bigger than any natural disasters around the world. So basically, it's something we need to deal with, and I think we need to increase more and more collaboration between technical community, but also diplomatic community. Probably also what we need to work on more is attribution, because often, this is my personal view, I see often the attributions happen very quickly, but from technical perspective, I understand, to attribute an attack to someone is going to be very challenging, because you need to have more evidence, you need to spend more time to ensure that the attribution is correct. And when you attribute something to someone which is not kind of true, or it's misleading, then the challenge is basically collaborating, how to work together. So I think, we need to work more on capacity development. So basically, I mean, often I go against the term of capacity building, because capacity building is we build capacity where there is no capacity. But I think now we need to continue development, because I think, all regions have capacity, but we need to continue development of the capacity. So, probably we need to change the language, how we approach. And another thing, which I think we can strengthen protection of critical infrastructure is that, if development community and member states work together in terms of, collaborating and kind of, coordinating the activities, aligning each other, how we can work together and basically, support the development of the world. Because I think, I mean, we are having all these national and transnational conflicts, but I think, something which is coming after all the world is the climate change. So, and I think, we need to promote more of, actually what is happening to us as a world, and probably, the political tensions will reduce, and we can work better on cybersecurity and other challenges we face as a world. So I think, probably, this is my input. I don't know. Let's see, how conversation goes, and I'll probably add and chip in with other views. Thank you.
Thank you, Oran. So it's about strengthening our capacity, but and also I think indeed the link between the technical and the diplomatic community, sometimes we don't speak the same language, so it's also about, I guess, strengthening our common understanding of each other, and maybe learning how to speak the language of the other, so we can work better together as well. Thank you very much for this perspective. I think we will now, in our journey throughout the world, jump into the Western Balkans region with Francisca. You have been working with the technical community, the CERTs in that region, and you've helped them set up informal networks where actually it's about getting to know each other, building trust, sharing information. And I think that's relates a bit to what Oran was saying also about the need for to build on our capacity and also to better exchange information. Can you tell us a bit more about how can such networks of technical experts help to protect the critical transnational critical infrastructure?
Thank you very much, Marie, and hello everyone. Very pleased to see you again. Indeed, we have my organization, the Geneva Center for Security Sector Governance, DCAF, have been working for quite some time in the Western Balkan region in Europe. And one of the areas that we work with is organizing regional events for national certs. And indeed, this has helped through a long-term process to facilitate communication and build trust, and now led to what one can describe as an informal network of where the staff of this certs communicate. I want to kind of take up on what the previous speakers have said, that there is a lot that can be done by different communities. And I think it is important definitely to see the potential of the technical community to also get involved in, transnational, international processes. But I think it is very important to then go back to see, as Orhan had said, what's happening at the national level. Because these certs, they cannot work in a vacuum. They cannot do diplomacy or in a vacuum. They are part of a national structure where they I think for example, the certs have a very interesting and role that they can play. They are usually in countries, either the certs or the national cybersecurity agencies, in charge of also supporting and coordinating with critical infrastructure and critical information infrastructure. So they are really there to support and to help them and to enforce cybersecurity standards, and also to exchange information that might have also received from friendly neighbors on cyber threats. But I think this cannot be done in a vacuum or outside of diplomatic processes, as you know. I mean, we've talked quite a bit about agreements, bilateral or regional or international, about coordination between different countries on protecting of CII. And I think this is, we know that there are different actors involved in it. And there's, on the one hand, the diplomatic community, and then the technical community can come in with their expertise. But it is very important that in a country, the roles of diplomats, of technical community, or for example, certs, and other actors are clearly defined. And it's clear what the role they play in, for example, in this process of protecting transnational critical infrastructure, and that it's also clear how they coordinate and communicate with each other. Because as has already been mentioned, I think this is a big problem. You have different actors working on similar topics, but there is no clarity about how they should cooperate. They often don't even meet regularly in meetings. So I think that's one of the areas where when we talk about also capacity building or capacity development, that we should not see these different actors in isolation. That I think part of the capacity development would be to strengthen the links, clarify roles and responsibilities, and strengthen links between those different stakeholder groups at national level.
Thank you, Francisca. I think the message is clear that we need to strengthen our capacity, everyone's capacity, also at national level first. And then that would also allow for better engagement, I think, at regional and then international level. But let's put everything one step at a time and start with the strengthening at national level of this collaboration, also between the technical and the diplomatic community. Maybe I'll move back to Willa and look at from your perspective on the Africa's energy sector. Can you share with us some good practices, good example at your level, at the African Union level, and what kind of further steps would you think government and industry stakeholders in the region can take to better protect the energy infrastructure? I think it's always good to have also look at concrete sectors. So Tuwela, the floor is yours to share your perspective on this.
Thank you very much. And maybe let me just start by appreciating, I think, Rashida's intervention and especially the idea of, the fact that critical infrastructure perhaps will be looked at and prioritized differently within different member states and regions, depending on, what is obtaining in the region and also in terms of how regions work and are organized. And I think also to Orhan's point about the fact that, capacity building, but maybe enhancing and going further in terms of, capacity endowments and looking more at very deliberate strategies for capacity development, I think are very important points. So I think turning to the case of Africa and looking at good practice and maybe trying to do a bit of a balancing act between the energy sector, but also all the other infrastructure sectors as well. I think one thing that I would cite as good practice, that I think, this is also to Rashida's point, but also in terms of the way Africa works and is structured, is the idea of, really being able to foster and promote regional cooperation and harmonization across the different regions, because that then makes it easier when we now want to start implementing different policy frameworks, if there is some way in which there's a bit of harmonization, but also that there is some cooperation. Within the energy sector, of course, and as with other sectors, there's a myriad of stakeholders that are involved in all of this. So you will have your utilities at the national level, you have the power pools, you have the regional economic communities, you have other private sector entities, perhaps, that are responsible for grid development. And then obviously you have the African Union itself. So there is a need for a very balanced cascading of cooperation, both from the top going down, but also from the bottom going up. And being able to structure this in a way that makes sense, I think, is important. And I think for the energy sector, I think Africa has managed to do this in a very coherent way by bringing together all these different actors to look at the sector critically and identify the different areas where harmonization and standardization is needed, but also establishing the relevant cooperation frameworks. When we now look maybe very specifically at the issues of cybersecurity, I think we're all aware that the African Union has its Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, which has now entered into force, and which also sets, I think, a very good framework in terms of how the continent wants to approach issues of cybersecurity, issues of privacy, issues of data protection. And I think what is important then as we move forward is making sure that this convention is seen not as an ICT instrument or an ICT device, but that it really has importance across the entire infrastructure landscape. And obviously beyond, when we start looking at just general issues of people's day-to-day lives as well. To the point about capacity and the capacity endowments, really, when we now look at how we will operationalize the Cybersecurity Convention, again, very important to make sure that we're not losing sight of the fact that in addition to the digital cyber experts, if I can call them that we need to make sure that our experts that are managing our different utilities, whether it's in water, whether it's in energy, and those that are managing our other infrastructure, in terms of transport in the water sector, that all of these are adequately equipped with the understanding of cybersecurity measures, but also that there is some element of coordination and cooperation across the different sectors within countries at regional level, and then also at a continental level as well. And then lastly, I think that, in terms of good practice, I think the GFCE, perhaps I would mention this a little bit, just in terms of this idea of being able to provide a framework where one can actually have a way in which to match the capacity needs in terms of cyber capacity building, and linking that to where expertise and experts lie, and being able to make those connections and offer that platform that enables this flow of expertise and experts between regions and between countries, so as to enhance the cybersecurity posturing across the globe. Back to you, Marie.
Thank you very much, Joella. I think you touch upon another important point is also sharing best practices across sectors, and it's that the cooperation need not only to happen between um, the technical community and the diplomatic community, but also across sectors. Because the more we get connected, the more we rely on each one sector rely on the other. But also, I think each sector can learn from the best practice of the other. And I think you point out to your best practice from the energy sector, and I'm pretty sure a lot of other sectors can learn from how you're trying to like put things together and to be able to share better the information to make um your infrastructure also more resilient. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do here. And I can see on the screen of one thing that there are already some exchange of willingness to exchange information about what everyone is doing. So I think that's the whole objective, is really to share our experience here and to connect and continue that discussion also after the session. So I'm quite excited about what I see on the screen on my left, I have to say. And it's not only happening in the room. So maybe we'll guide you through the next step in our journey, which is our nearly final stop, because we will then open the floor to everyone to ask questions. But apparently someone wants to take the floor. Yes, Rashida, please do.
Thank you very much, Marie. I just want to just connect and give some response with regards to Francisca's views as well as Toela. Francisca's mentioned about the importance of structuring and position while we are talking about the technical community in terms of certs and giving them a proper place at the national level, as well as how Toela mentions the importance of making sure that the things are being interconnected in such a way, where I think this is the experience that we took in terms of making sure the discussions between the technical people and diplomat, as well as the people that look into the policy at national level. While we are developing the act, which just being enforced last August, this is also the experience that we got from the exposure, from the learning curve that we got from the OEWG and other activities that we see at national level as well as at regional level. Specifically on the third part, currently with the act, we actually have the chief executive of my organization, the National Cybersecurity Agency, has the responsibility to maintain the National Cyber Coordination and Command Center, which is our national cert, and the act actually give an importance of the designation of sector lead, where they are being empowered to designate their national critical infrastructure with the processes. Then they are compulsory notification of incident, where the coordination can actually being swiftly being done at national level. This is also complement the works that and the development that is happening at national level, where the national cert, which is the NC4 itself, is also being submitted at the UN OEWG as the technical global point of contact. This is where I think the learning curve our country takes in terms of understanding and connecting the dots between the discussion with the technical people, the policy people at the domestic level, as well as the diplomat or diplomat that works at the United Nations. Another part that I also want to touch is the opportunity that we have in terms of capacity building, where one of the things that we managed to work together, especially with UNIDIR and at national level, we get a blessing from our management to do that, where we will develop and institutionalize a proper training in our institute that train the diplomat before they are being stationed internationally in terms of cyber diplomacy or tech diplomacy, so that the people that face at when they go overseas, the diplomat have the clear understanding of when to connect the dots and how actually they can bring back the discussion that they see and they negotiate at any platform, bilaterally or multilaterally, back to the organizations that look and lead national cybersecurity initiative at national level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rashida. I think indeed it's important to know who to contact and where, and those points of contact are key and crucial. And thanks for sharing your best practices. I think your point about capacity building and the training of diplomats is an amazing one, and I'm very pleased as well that our co-organizer today are being mentioned by so many of you on their best practices as well, because I do think that UNIDIR and GFCE are doing lots of work on to try to strengthen those capacity as well. And indeed, the women in cyber, we can see here that we have quite a panel with lots of women. So it's also nice to see this, because it's not always the case. But thank you, Aran, for bringing a bit of men balance in this discussion as well. So maybe or no, yes, I no sign on it from the virtual room, but so maybe maybe we'll step in our last topic, and before I give the floor to everyone in to some questions. So maybe what are the so we will step in for the future and where we are heading next step in our journey. So maybe Francisca, you want to start with what are the opportunities for greater cooperation? And do you see, I think you started like answering that question a bit already, but do you see like ways to improve and to set up mechanism to better be prepared and equipped for those for greater collaboration? And that includes also the role for the multi-stakeholder community in those discussion.
Yes, I think indeed, I think we've spoken quite a lot about this already, so I'll keep it short. And I think maybe just a very practical step, and Rashida already mentioned it. I think a very good first step would be, when you do training of cyber diplomats, actually one of the most essential thing, make them aware of what's happening in their country, who's in their country, who they need to coordinate with, who they need to consult, also to establish national priorities, because these are the national priorities that they will bring to the international discussions, including discussions on CII. And also, engage with the multi-stakeholder community in order to identify indeed and to work with CII. I think I'll leave it at that in the interest of time. Just two first practical steps that I would recommend to take.
Thank you. I think we are like running. We only have a few minutes left, so maybe what I'll do, if that's fine, I'll look at the room and see if there are some pressing question coming from the room. Yes, I see a gentleman at the back. Excuse me? Mike, yes, please. Thank you. Or it's coming from you back. Yeah. No, a mic. Thank you.
Hello. Yes. So I'm interview from South Korea, and I'm curious to know how many of you. So I guess that you're coming from each of you are coming from different countries. So how many of you have seen policy documents that actually addresses transnational critical information infrastructure, and talk about whether your government is allowed to or planning to attack in case of emergencies or in case of contingencies? Especially it would be relevant if you have seen any documents published by the military administration. So is your country, especially the military department, allows or take into consideration the possibility they would be able to attack critical infrastructures in other countries?
Is there any question also on the chat? So maybe we can, no? Okay, so maybe we'll take your question, and because we also have 2 minutes left, At the same time, I'll ask the speakers to answer your question and then to give their final remarks before Teresa wrap it up and do our photo album of our journey together. So maybe I'll give you the floor one by one, and then you can address the question that has been asked. But also you can bring us a bit of your flavor. And Francisca, you've already started to do so on what are the opportunities in the future, be it at national, regional, or at international level for greater collaboration? But also, what can stakeholder bring to the table in terms of the protection of critical infrastructure and the importance of actually this multi stakeholder cooperation that is needed to be better equipped and to have a more resilient critical infrastructure? Maybe I'll start with at the bottom right with Oran, and then I'll go to Tawela, to Francisca, or to Rashida and Francisca. So Oran, you have the floor.
So can you hear me? I think so. I think the question of the gentleman, honestly, I don't have an answer because ITU is development agency. So we keep supporting member states to build the capacity. So, we are focused on Global South, where we, run cyber drills, where we bring communities together, the technical communities. Now we are trying to bridge the gaps, bringing diplomatic community to our meetings and have a discussion among them. So in principle, I don't have an answer for him in that regard, but, it all comes down to, collaboration, information sharing. So we have often, even countries which are aligned to each other, they don't share all information. So basically, I think quite a lot needs to be done. I think trust needs to be built, and so we need to work around that. So I think the opportunities are there to increase collaboration, but are we going to take action on really putting the citizen at the center? Because I think what is happening now, we are putting at the center other things. But if we put the citizen at the center, those who need the essential services, those who benefit from those essential services, and those who contribute back to the society, I think, then I think quite a lot of things can be solved. But, I'm very idealistic in that regard. So I think, I'm not sure, what would work the best, but, we keep continuing to work together with the Global South, building the capacity which is needed to support the digital developments of the countries. We, help women in cyber through mentorships, through capacity building and so on. I mean, a lot to be done. Honestly, a lot to be done, and we need to sit down as development agencies or as partners or stakeholders on building capacity, developing capacity. So we need to sit down and kind of decide who's going to be doing what, because I think a lot of duplication of efforts is happening on the same area. So I think we need to kind of spread the net and try to cover most we can, because the resources are limited in terms of financial and human. And I think, can be done a lot if just there is a will to sit down and lower our egos and work together. I mean, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Oran. So I think, as you said, a lot needs to be said and done. So but we are also pressure with time. So I will give each of you 15 seconds, and then Teresa can wrap up. I'm really sorry, but maybe we can have another session on the next IGF to continue the discussion, because apparently so much needs to be done and so much needs to be said. And we are seeing this initial cooperation that are taking place now. So maybe, Tawela, if you can give us 50 seconds a short snap of what you think we should be doing.
Okay, thank you very much. Very quickly, I think as we see now that there's a large move towards privatization of a lot of infrastructure, whether it is in-country or transnational infrastructure, this means then that on the one hand, there will be a need for stronger collaboration between private sector and governments through very structured PPPs that focus on this issue of the protection of that infrastructure. But at the same time, governments, I think, need to then continue setting the container in terms of the relevant policy and regulation mechanisms, but making sure that these are things that can be implemented and that are enabling the protection of the infrastructure, but also, I think, as Oran has said, making sure that we're not losing sight of putting people at the center of what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tawela. Rashida, you have 15 seconds.
I'm going to be short and quick, but I just want to touch about just now earlier, we mentioned about OEWG discussions. So one of the things that we are doing right now, we are in the final lap of the OEWG. The central of the discussion before next July is to ensure what would be the future permanent mechanism, where we want to actually together with all the states to develop a permanent mechanism on how we want to position cybersecurity at the UN. This is where an important discussion starts, where actually we want to position the stakeholder so that they can contribute effectively in the permanent mechanism that we wanted to do. One thing we talk a lot today is about energy from Tawila, where if we want to talk about energy, be sector specific, bring the right stakeholder, bring the right skill, then we can solve the right specific question in sector specific problems at that level, that it can be escalated at regional and national level. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Rashida. Francisca?
Just to add to what everything has been said, maybe go back to the beginning. I think there's still also some work to be done to just raise awareness of the existence of this transnational critical infrastructure. And a lot of, I think, smaller countries might not be aware, or they might not be aware of where these, often these transnational critical infrastructure maybe is owned by also foreign companies, how they can get engaged in discussions on their protection. So I think that's a good step for the very, very beginning. That's still, I think, necessary.
Thank you, Francesca. I will give my last words to Teresa, but before this, I would like to thank all the panelists for being with us and sharing your expertise. And this is just the beginning. But I'll give the floor to Teresa.
Thank you, Mary. So we put this session together because we thought there was a little problem. There was a problem with the lack of understanding of what benefit the involvement of the technical community can have in multi-stakeholder dialogues on these topics. We have felt from our experience that sometimes these multi-stakeholder consultations have been more a tick-the-box approach, which is not what we want, because they are stakeholders in addition to the myriad of other stakeholders, as was already said at this session. So we hope that this hour also helped us to explore a little how the technical community can get involved, especially next year in the regulational dialogues. We had some great examples from Africa, from Asia, from Western Balkans, with some concrete challenges, including the definition on the national level of what is actually critical infrastructure, some efforts for regional cooperation as well. So I will not be able to go to all these details, but if you allow me, there are a few kind of call for action that I think can shape the continuation of our discussion on this topic. The first is that we do need to strengthen the collaboration between states and the technical community, and we will be able to explore more in detail how, be it cert-to-cert cooperation or in the framework of the open-ended working groups. We do need to build capacities, especially for developing countries. We have heard the capacity building or capacity development, as Orhan clarified, has been coming up in the discussion in relation to these topics. And another idea that I think we can play with is how can we further convene multi-stakeholder dialogues on protecting transnational critical infrastructure, which is something that we will look into, and we will try to come up with some ideas, be it in form of a series of workshops or other initiatives. So I will have to stop here because I know we are over, but thank you very much for being part of this.
Thank you and have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.